Carl Gustav Jung's analytical psychology explored the unconscious mind, archetypes, dreams, and the lifelong path of individuation. The process of becoming a whole self-realized person. While many of his ideas centered on inner transformation, few are more provocative today than how his theories intersect with the lives of women who live alone. In a society that often equates female worth with romantic relationships, Jung's framework offers a startlingly different interpretation. A woman alone is not broken or lacking. She may be in the most important psychological phase of her life. Jung did not idealize solitude as an escape, nor did he criticize partnership. Instead, he insisted that psychological growth often requires a period of separation from societal roles and expectations. For many women, this means learning to live without a man, not as a reaction to failure, but as an act of radical individuation. This video explores Jung's perspective on feminine solitude and independence, connecting psychological concepts with real-world implications. It draws from Jung's writings, modern interpretations, and contemporary relevance to analyze why women living alone may, in fact, be closer to self-realization than many assume. 1. The core of Jungian thought, individuation and wholeness. Jung's theory of individuation is the cornerstone of his psychology. Individuation is the journey of integrating unconscious elements into conscious awareness to become a unified self. It's not about self-improvement, but rather self-revelation, unearthing all parts of the psyche, including the shadow-repressed traits, the animus inner masculine in women, and other archetypal forces. This process requires silence, reflection, and space, conditions often only possible in solitude. Jung believed solitude was essential for individuation, writing, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." Thus, for women, living alone can be a crucible for individuation, allowing for the confrontation of internal conflicts without distraction. Instead of being a sign of social exclusion, it becomes the condition for wholeness. 2. Limitations and critiques of Jung's views on women. While Carl Jung's psychological framework has inspired countless individuals in their quest for wholeness, his views on gender, particularly women, are not without serious limitations. Many of his ideas reflect the cultural, social, and philosophical biases of his time, early 20th century Europe, a period deeply embedded in patriarchal structures. As a result, even Jung's most insightful theories about the female psyche are often constrained by gender essentialism, heteronormativity, and idealized roles. Gender essentialism. Jung frequently described women and men through binary oppositions, women as emotional, relational, and intuitive, men as rational, independent, and decisive. While these descriptions were intended as symbolic frameworks, not absolute truths, they often reinforced stereotypes. The anima female aspect within men was associated with passivity and nurturing, while the animus male aspect within women was seen as assertive and logical. In practice, this reinforced the notion that masculine traits are active and dominant, and feminine traits are receptive and secondary. Critics argue that this essentialist framing limits the complexity of actual human beings, especially women, who are fully capable of encompassing the full spectrum of psychological traits without filtering them through a masculine lens. Modern depth psychologists and feminists have pushed back against this, advocating for a more fluid, less hierarchical understanding of inner psychic forces. Heteronormative and marital bias. Jung's writing also presumed heterosexual relationships as the norm, and often emphasized the importance of union between a man and a woman as a pathway to psychological wholeness. In this model, individuation was frequently understood in the context of a heterosexual relationship, where a woman might individuate by integrating her animus, often projected onto a male partner, then reabsorbing it into herself. This framework excludes queer, non-binary and asexual identities altogether, and it assumes that romantic partnership is not only natural but necessary. For women who live alone, by choice or otherwise, this idea can be alienating or invalidating. It overlooks the possibility that deep inner work and wholeness can arise outside the bounds of romance, marriage, or traditional partnership. The overuse of archetypes. Another critique of Jung's system is his rigid use of archetypes. While archetypes can be helpful tools to describe recurring patterns, they risk reducing people to symbols. For example, the virgin, mother, witch, and crone are all archetypal roles often assigned to women, each with fixed meanings and associations. But real women's lives don't fit neatly into such symbolic boxes. This symbolic shorthand can flatten unique experiences and create pressure to conform to mythical patterns rather than embrace individual truth. It can also lead to spiritual bypassing, where psychological or social issues are explained away as just archetypal instead of being dealt with directly and contextually. Racial and cultural blind spots. Jung's work also reflects significant Eurocentric bias. His archetypes were drawn largely from Western mythology, Christianity, and Greco-Roman symbolism. While he did study Eastern religions and indigenous traditions, he often did so through a colonial lens, interpreting them in ways that served his own symbolic system. As a result, Jungian psychology can lack cultural nuance and universality when applied to people outside white, Western, Christian contexts. For women of color, this means that traditional Jungian analysis may fail to recognize the intersectional realities they face, like systemic racism, cultural identity, and the layered impact of patriarchy and colonialism. Modern Jungian scholars are working to decolonize depth psychology, but these critiques remain necessary. Evolving beyond Jung. Despite these limitations, many thinkers have built upon Jung's foundational ideas to create more inclusive, empowering models. Feminist Jungians like Marion Woodman reframed the animus not as a masculine trait within women, but as an energy of discernment, action, and truth-telling, regardless of gender. Jung's archetypes have also been expanded to reflect a broader, more intersectional set of life experiences. In short, Jung gave us tools, not answers. His vision of the solitary woman as a site of psychological power is radical, but incomplete. It's up to modern thinkers to refine, critique, and expand his legacy so it resonates with the diverse, complex, and often contradictory realities women live today. 3. Archetypes and the woman who lives alone. In Jungian terms, every person hosts a cast of inner archetypes, universal patterns like the mother, the hero, the trickster, and the wise old man. For women, one of the most crucial internal figures is the animus, representing logic, agency, and assertiveness, traits historically associated with masculinity. In relationships, a woman may unconsciously project her animus onto a male partner, expecting him to fulfill her inner strength, clarity, or direction. But when she lives alone, those projections collapse. The animus must be integrated, not outsourced. This can be painful, but it ultimately empowers. Additionally, Jung described a lesser-known but vital archetype, the witch or wise woman, a figure both feared and revered for her independence, mystery, and spiritual power. Women who live alone often unconsciously activate this archetype, triggering both fascination and discomfort in others. She is free of male protection and social constraint, and this threatens norms. 4. Solitude as a site of psychological power. Solitude offers what Jung called a psychic container for development. In a world constantly pushing for connectivity, the woman who chooses to live alone is making space for deep inner work. This work often includes confronting the shadow. The shadow includes aspects of ourselves we deny or suppress. Living alone allows these to surface without judgment. For women, the shadow may contain anger, ambition, or sexual desire, traits they've been socialized to hide. Integrating the animus, rather than relying on external masculine energy, a woman begins to embody her own voice, assertiveness, and decision-making power. Creative expression. Jung believed the soul speaks through symbols and art. Women alone often find themselves creating, writing, painting, inventing, not for others, but to externalize the unconscious. In this way, a solitary life is not a void but a workshop, a psychic forge in which the self is hammered into authenticity. 5. Breaking the spell of projection. Jung emphasized that much of love is projection. We project our inner ideals, fears, and needs onto others. A woman may see a man not for who he is, but for the animus traits she has yet to own: strength, purpose, wisdom. Living alone disrupts this cycle. There's no one to project onto. The mirror shatters, and what's left is self-examination. This is deeply uncomfortable but deeply freeing. It's also why some women who live alone develop sharper insight. They're no longer living in the fog of projection. Instead, they reclaim their power and relate to others without dependency or illusion. 6. Social myths and the stigma of the solitary woman. Western culture has long been suspicious of women without male guardianship. From the spinster to the crazy cat lady, cultural archetypes shame women who live alone. Even today, women are pressured to explain their single status, as though independence is a temporary state of failure. Jung's lens reveals this stigma as a defense mechanism. Society projects its discomfort with feminine sovereignty onto those who dare embody it. The independent woman reminds others of their own repressed potential and unexamined choices. Ironically, the women most stigmatized, those who live alone by choice, may be the ones furthest along in individuation. They've faced their shadows, integrated their animus, and no longer need external validation. 7. Creative solitude and psychological maturity. Jung saw creativity as a byproduct of individuation. Solitude sharpens the psyche, making room for insights, dreams, and inspiration to rise. Many women who live alone report an uptick in creative output, not because they are bored, but because they are no longer performing for others. Whether it's writing, crafting, designing, or dreaming, this creative work is not always public. Jung described the process of creating for the self as sacred. It is communication between the conscious ego and the deeper self, what he called the self with a capital S. Psychological maturity comes when a person can tolerate solitude without self-abandonment. For Jung, this was a sign not of isolation, but of inner cohesion. 8. The pain and freedom of living alone. It's important to acknowledge that Jung did not romanticize solitude. Living alone is not easy. It can bring periods of grief, doubt, and existential despair. But Jung argued that these are the growing pains of the soul. Pain forces introspection. Without distraction, one confronts the essential questions: who am I without others? What do I want? Not just what I've been taught to want. Women who live alone must answer these questions directly. There is no man to shape the narrative, no partner to absorb the discomfort. This is the freedom Jung spoke of, not comfort, but truth. 9. A modern lens, Jung's theory today. Today, more women live alone than ever before. In the US, over 19 million women live by themselves, some by choice, some by circumstance. Jung's theory gives this trend psychological depth. It's not merely demographic, it's archetypal. Solitude today is not a retreat from life, but a step into a deeper one. Women are refusing to outsource their worth. They are integrating their animus, owning their projections, and living creatively without apology. In this way, Jung's century-old ideas feel startlingly modern. The woman who lives alone is not adrift, she is ascending the spiral path of individuation. Conclusion: wholeness without permission. The woman who lives alone is not broken. She is not waiting. She is not unfinished. From a Jungian perspective, she may be the most honest person in the room, willing to face herself, willing to grow, willing to live without scripts. Solitude is not an escape from life, but an encounter with its raw materials. The inner masculine meets the feminine, the shadow is revealed, and the true self begins to rise. Carl Jung didn't tell women to live alone, but he made clear, wholeness is not found in others. It's forged in the soul's crucible, often in the quiet rooms of one's own life.